You walk into the Martin County PL Center on a Tuesday night, and you're expecting this incredible cinematic breakthrough moment.
Oh, yeah, like out of a movie.
Exactly. Where you say the perfect thing, the youth looks up with this sudden clarity, and their entire life trajectory shifts in like 2 minutes flat.
If only it worked like that.
Right. But instead you walk in, and what do you actually get? You get the loud crunch of pizza-flavored goldfish, a couple of future leaders intensely staring at their phones,
Right.
side conversations that just refuse to stop, and, well, a thick wall of defensive apathy. So welcome to this deep dive prep session.
It is, it's the absolute definition of a heavy room. And tonight, when you step through those doors, you are going to feel that weight immediately.
Which is exactly why we're so glad you're here with us right now. We're getting you ready for Coach AJ's session tonight. And our mission today isn't to hand you a script. It's to give you the inside track on the psychology of what's going to happen at your table.
Yeah, we want to hand you the exact signals to listen for, the psychological friction you're going to encounter, and some high-leverage moves so you can walk into that room feeling completely grounded.
And we need to validate that heavy room reality right off the bat. The staring at phones, the silence, the testing of your patience that is completely normal.
It really is. That is just the environment we operate in. And most importantly for you as a mentor, that resistance is not a failure on your part.
Right. It's not about you.
Exactly. When a youth deflects or puts up a wall, it means you are scanning exactly where this work matters the absolute most.
So let's get right into Coach AJ's game plan for tonight. The core focus is resilience. And I've been in the room when he does this. And he doesn't ease into it. He brings out the heavy hitters right away.
Yeah, he frames the whole conversation around two massive icons, Michael Jordan and Simone Biles.
But you know what I find fascinating is how he positions them.
Yeah.
He actively ignores the billions of dollars, the shoe deals, the cereal boxes. He goes straight into the mud with them.
Well, he has to, because if you just talk about the gold medals, you lose the room instantly. So Coach AJ is going to talk about how Jordan was famously cut from his high school varsity team.
Right.
He's going to focus on the fact that Jordan missed over 9,000 shots in his career. He was handed the ball for the game-winning shot 26 times, and he completely botched it.
26 times. Wow.
Yeah, he lost 300 games. Coach AJ even brings up the infamous Jordan rules from the late 80s.
Oh, where the Detroit Pistons basically systematically beat him up on the court.
Exactly. Just physically brutalized him game after game.
And then the pivot to Simone Biles is incredibly stark, too. It's not about her, gravity-defying routines. He talks about her navigating the foster care system as a toddler after her parents lost custody.
Yeah, touching on her surviving severe abuse within the gymnastics system, too.
And then he spotlights Tokyo, that terrifying moment when she got the twisties. And for those who don't know, that isn't just getting dizzy. It's this severe psychological phenomenon where a gymnast completely loses their spatial awareness in midair.
Right, their brain and body just completely disconnect.
Exactly. She was the most decorated gymnast in history on the world's biggest stage, and she pulled herself out because she knew pushing through would physically endanger her and hurt her team.
Which, that decision required a monumental amount of psychological resilience to face the inevitable global backlash just to protect her own well-being.
But let's look at how this actually plays out at the table tonight. If I'm a youth sitting in that room and I'm struggling to pass geometry, dealing with a fractured family at home, and I hear about billionaires and Olympians, my immediate internal monologue is, well, I'm not an Olympian.
Yeah, I'm not a billionaire.
Right. Like, what does this have to do with me? So how does Coach AJ bridge that massive gap between macro celebrity and the micro reality of a teenager's life?
It's actually a brilliant setup because he is intentionally creating cognitive dissonance. Coach AJ knows they're going to resist the comparison. They will think exactly what you just said.
Yeah.
But he's not using Jordan and Biles to say, hey, you can be a superstar athlete. He's using these extreme examples to establish a universal, undeniable baseline, which is that life is inherently unfair, even to the most talented people on the planet.
I've actually watched him execute this maneuver, and it is a masterclass. He'll stop pacing, look at the kids and say, raise your hand if life has been absolutely 100% fair to you.
And you could hear a pin drop.
Dead quiet. Total silence. Then he'll ask, raise your hand if life has been unfair to you. And you just watch every single hand slowly go up. It's the great equalizer.
Because it forces a realization.
Yeah.
The hardships, the abuse, the failures, the unfairness, these are just the cards dealt by a chaotic world. They aren't a permanent identity.
Right. Michael Jordan didn't internalize his failures and identify as the guy who chokes on game winners.
No, he identified as the guy who gets back in the empty gym at 6 a.m. the next morning. And Simone Biles doesn't identify as a victim of the foster care system. She identifies as someone who built strength despite it.
So knowing that the youth are going to feel that cognitive dissonance tonight, and knowing they're going to initially resist these grand comparisons, you, as a mentor, need to have your radar turned all the way up.
Absolutely.
Because the resistance rarely looks like someone politely raising their hand and saying, "Excuse me, I respectfully disagree with the premise of this exercise." It's much more covert than that.
Exactly. And you have to understand what that covert resistance sounds like so you can navigate it.
Like, if they feel cornered by a concept, you're going to see deflection. A conversation gets a little too real, and suddenly someone cracks a loud joke, or they become incredibly fascinated by a speck of dust on their shoe.
Yeah, or if they aren't deflecting with humor, you might see the exact opposite. Total agonizing silence.
You ask about a time they failed, and you just get a blank stare. Or you get the classic apathy response.
Yeah.
The shoulder shrug. Whatever. Doesn't matter. I don't care.
And then, of course, there's the blame game. You know, it's the teacher's fault I failed, or the coach just doesn't like me, so I got cut.
It's essentially a pity party, and they've made themselves the only guest on the invite list. They're insulating themselves from the responsibility of the failure.
That is a highly accurate way to frame it, but the crucial shift for you sitting at that table is how you react to the pity party. When you hear the jokes, the silence, the apathy, or the blaming, your instinct might be to pull back.
Or assume they're totally shut down.
Right. But I want to coach you to view these not as shutdowns, but as entry points. When you hear these specific signals, that is your cue to lean in.
Let's explore the mechanism behind that, though. Why is blaming the teacher an entry point?
Because it reveals their working definition of failure. You know, we talk a lot in mentor training about this concept of failure as an enemy versus failure as a friend.
Oh, yeah, that's a huge one.
Right. When a youth blames others, puts themselves down, or marinates in bitterness, they're treating failure as a hostile enemy. It's a definitive stop sign for them.
But when they treat failure as a friend, they use it as data. It becomes a directional guideline.
Exactly. So when you hear them blaming or deflecting, you are hearing the psychological friction between those two states. They know they failed, but they just don't have the tools to process it constructively yet.
So your job isn't to judge that friction. It's to sit in it, listen to it, and help them identify it.
Spot on.
Okay, so you spot the entry point, you hear the joke,
Okay.
you see the wall go up, you don't freeze, and you don't panic. You pull out a high-leverage move. Let's talk about the practical tools you can actually use at the table tonight, starting with reframes.
Yeah, a reframe is essentially just a gentle pivot in perspective. One of the most effective reframes you can borrow is Coach Matt's famous line, "It's okay to pause, but just don't park here."
I love that one. It's so powerful because it validates the emotion first. You're saying, hey, it makes total sense that you're angry you got cut from the team. Take a second. Be mad for 24 hours. Feel that frustration.
But don't change your permanent address to this feeling. Don't set up shop here. It challenges the stagnation without dismissing their pain.
Right. And another angle on a reframe is focusing on the toll the anger takes. You might ask, that makes perfect sense why you're mad, but what does holding on to that anger actually cost you?
Ooh, that's good. It shifts the brain's gears. It forces them out of a reactive emotional state and into a more analytical, inquisitive state. They have to actually evaluate the price of their own bitterness.
And to keep them in that analytical state, you need to ask good questions, not an interrogation, just simple, open-ended questions like, what do you think that reaction leads to long-term?
Or where else does that frustration show up for you?
Yeah. But my absolute favorite question to ask at the table is, what would 1% better look like this week?
Oh, that is the ultimate pressure release valve.
I do have to push back on this a little bit, though. Let's look at the reality of the room. If a youth is failing multiple classes, dealing with trauma, maybe facing suspension isn't telling them to just be 1% better, incredibly condescending.
It can sound that way, yeah.
Doesn't it sound like telling someone drowning in the ocean to just swim 1 inch? How does a mentor use that without sounding completely out of touch?
That is a very valid concern. If it's delivered as a flippant dismissal, yes, it will completely backfire. But the psychology behind the 1% question is about dismantling the paralysis of perfectionism.
Okay, unpack that a bit.
Well, when a kid is failing geometry and dealing with a broken home, telling them they need to turn their whole life around by tomorrow is a trap. The brain literally cannot process a 50% improvement when it's in survival mode.
Right, it's just too much.
They look at the mountain of issues, realize they can't fix it all at once, and so they choose to do nothing.
They embrace the apathy because it's safer than trying and failing again.
Exactly. But asking what 1% better looks like changes the math. 1% isn't fixing the broken home. 1% is just deciding to open the textbook for 10 minutes tonight.
It's an achievable micro goal.
Better is enough just to get the wheel turning. If they get 1% better every week, the compounding effect over a few months is what actually builds resilience. We aren't looking for perfect. We are looking for momentum.
Okay, that makes sense. It's about removing that psychological paralysis. Now, if questions and reframes aren't working, you can always lean on a good metaphor. Human beings are hardwired for stories.
Definitely.
The one Coach Bob uses all the time, and it's absolutely perfect for tonight's theme, is the oyster and the pearl. And what's fascinating here is the actual biological mechanism behind it. Think about how an oyster creates a pearl.
Right. It doesn't just spontaneously generate this beautiful gem because the water is warm and it's having a great day.
No, the formation of a pearl is fundamentally a trauma response.
Exactly. A pearl only forms when an irritating, painful, jagged grain of sand or a parasite forces its way inside the oyster's shell.
It is physically damaging the oyster's soft tissue. It's incredibly uncomfortable. And the oyster is stuck. It can't just run away.
So it has a biological choice. It can let that jagged irritant tear it apart from the inside, or it can activate a defensive mechanism. The oyster starts secreting layers of this substance called nacre over the grain of sand to soothe the inflammation.
It coats the pain, layer after layer, year after year.
And over time, that painful, damaging intrusion is transformed into something incredibly valuable. A pearl is literally a monument to healed trauma.
That abuse, the poverty, the bad grades, getting cut from the team that's the jagged grain of sand, the future leaders sitting across from you tonight are experiencing that inflammation.
Yeah, and the metaphor shows them they have a choice. Let the sand destroy you or build armor around it, adapt and create something incredibly strong.
These metaphors are so effective at the table because they bypass the immediate defensive barrier. You aren't forcing them to talk directly about their own trauma, which is super threatening. You're talking about the biology of an oyster.
It creates a safe psychological distance for them to process the concept of resilience.
But, and this is a massive but, for anyone heading into the center tonight, knowing what to say is only half the battle. Knowing what will absolutely ruin the moment is what separates a rookie volunteer from a trusted mentor.
We definitely have to talk about the traps.
And I want to be clear, we aren't lecturing here. I'm sharing this because I know my biggest trap when I first started mentoring was wanting to fix everything with a grand speech.
Oh, we've all been there.
You see a kid hurting, and your instinct as an adult is to swoop in and impart all your life wisdom in a 5-minute monologue.
It is the most common trap because it comes from a place of deep empathy. We want to save them the pain we went through. But the moment you start monologuing, you violate the core rule of mentorship, which is that it's about their discovery, not your brilliance.
If you find yourself talking uninterrupted for more than 60 seconds, you have lost the table. They're just waiting for you to stop.
And the companion to that track is telling your whole life story. A little vulnerability from you is great, it builds a bridge. But the Tuesday night session is not the time to relive your high school glory days or center your own personal tragedies.
The spotlight has to stay on them.
Exactly. Another major trap is the instinct to correct them instantly. If a youth looks at you and says, "I'm just stupid, I can't do this," the immediate adult reflex is to shout, "No, you're not. You're brilliant. You're so smart."
Which feels supportive, but it actually completely invalidates their current reality.
Precisely. Contradicting them instantly makes them feel unheard. You are arguing with their lived experience. Instead, you have to pause, swallow that reflex, and explore why they feel that way.
Ask, what makes you say that?
Let them talk. Often, if you just listen, they will eventually talk their own way out of the negative self-image.
This ties perfectly into this fascinating behavioral psychology concept regarding praise. Because the way we deliver praise can actually destroy a kid's resilience if we aren't careful. Let's walk through that classroom A versus classroom B study, because it completely shifted how I interact at the table.
Oh, it's a foundational concept. Researchers wanted to understand the relationship between external praise and intrinsic motivation.
Right. So they took a group of young kids who naturally love to draw. They already had an intrinsic drive for it. They split them into 2 rooms. In classroom A, the adults were instructed to give explosive, unearned praise.
Over-the-top validation.
Exactly. Every single thing a kid drew, whether they spent an hour on a masterpiece or literally just scribbled a single line on a paper, was met with standing ovations. They got trophies, gold stars. You were a genius.
Meanwhile, in Classroom B, the adults were instructed to provide zero external praise.
None at all.
The kids drew their pictures, put them on the board, and evaluated their own work. The adults would just ask questions like, what do you like about this one? Or what would you change?
And after a couple of weeks, the results were staggering. The kids in Classroom A, the ones drowning in trophies and applause, completely stopped drawing. When given free time, they wouldn't touch the crayons.
The fake unearned praise completely destroyed their intrinsic drive.
Why does that happen, though?
It's known as the overjustification effect. When you drown a child in unearned external rewards, their brain shifts the motivation. They stop drawing because they love it and start drawing only to get the applause.
Wow.
But more insidiously, fake praise breeds deep self-doubt because kids aren't naive. They know when they didn't put in the effort. If you tell a youth they are amazing for doing the bare minimum, they immediately realize your praise is cheap.
They stop trusting your feedback.
And eventually they stop trusting their own internal compass.
So, words of praise without actual accomplishment equals self-doubt. But the kids in Classroom B couldn't wait to get back to drawing. They were building authentic self-respect because they were analyzing their own progress.
Exactly. Words of praise attached to real, earned accomplishment equal self-respect. And self-respect is not something a mentor can just hand to a youth across a table like a gold star. It can only grow through their own self-created success.
Your job isn't to be a cheerleader who claps at everything. Your job is to be a mirror that reflects their actual effort.
Which brings us to a really helpful summarizing mantra for your mentoring style tonight. Less talking, more timing. It's about knowing when to drop that 1% question and when to just sit in the heavy silence with them.
That silence can be incredibly productive. When a kid is staring at the table after a tough question, their brain is furiously processing cognitive friction.
It's uncomfortable for us to watch, but it's necessary for them. If you rush in to fill that silence just because you feel awkward, you steal their opportunity to figure it out for themselves.
So as you grab your keys and head to the PL Center tonight, I want to completely re-anchor your expectations. Please, hear this clearly. You are not walking into that room to change the entire culture of the center.
No, you're not.
You are not there to give a viral TED Talk. You are not there to magically reverse years of trauma or undo bad habits in a single 2-hour session.
If one youth thinks even slightly differently about a problem because of a brief conversation with you tonight, that is a massive, undeniable win.
A win is one kid.
It is one moment. It is a 1% change in trajectory. That is the entire goal of the program.
Just be present. Be real. Be a consistent adult who shows up. You don't need a perfectly memorized script. You just need to listen.
And I want to leave you with a final thought to mull over on your drive tonight. It builds on the core theme of resilience we've been talking about, but it brings it right back to your specific role at the table.
Okay, what is it?
Well, leadership expert John Maxwell has this incredibly grounding definition of resilience. He says resilience is not about how hard a hit you can give. It's about how many hits you can take and still keep moving forward, becoming better with each blow.
And tonight, one of these future leaders might test that theory on you. They might take their frustrations out on you.
They might roll their eyes, deflect your questions, crack jokes at your expense, or actively try to push you away just to see if you'll leave like everyone else has.
That is a hit.
But ask yourself this. If you take that hit, if you absorb that frustration without taking it personally, and you stay seated at that table anyway, what does that teach them about their own worth?
Wow.
What does it rewire in their brain when an adult doesn't walk away the second things get difficult?
They may not show it today. They might just eat another handful of pizza goldfish and stare at their phone until the session ends. But they remember who showed up for them. They remember who stayed when it was heavy.
So when you walk into that room tonight and there is no swelling movie soundtrack, just remember that the real breakthroughs are quiet. They sound like a kid realizing that their failures are just data, guiding them toward that next 1%.
Have a great grounded session tonight. We'll see you next time.